Hello everyone. In this video, I want to give you a little bit of an overview about Chapter 10 on motivation and emotion, and then we'll talk a little bit about theories of motivation and what motivates us. But Chapter 10 is a really exciting chapter. It's a really big chapter. There's a ton of information in this chapter, so I'm going to try to condense it as best I can, and I hope that you're going to really find it interesting. So we're going to talk initially just about the basic theories of emotion. We're going to talk about Abraham Maslow's theory of hierarchy of needs, and that as human beings we have needs beyond just meeting our basic needs. And then we'll also talk about eating disorders. We're going to talk about overeating. We're going to talk about anorexia and bulimia and what motivates people to overeat and to undereat. Then we're also going to talk about sexual orientation. We're going to talk about gender identity. And just our sexual motivation in general. And it's a really interesting aspect and really what kind of drives our sexual orientation, what defines our sexual orientation, that kind of information as well. And then we're going to talk a little bit about emotions. Where do our emotions come from? How do we express our emotions? Are emotions the same across cultures? It's a really interesting topic as well. So I hope that you're really going to enjoy this chapter and get a lot out of this chapter. So this first thing that we're going to talk about is just some of the different things about motivation and what motivates us. So what motivates us is different for every person, right? Some of us love chocolate. Some of us are not at all motivated by chocolate or sweets. Some of us would rather have a burger or pizza. Should put pizza on here too. Some of us are really motivated to excel at sports, and some of us are not so concerned about that. Most of us are motivated by money, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. We talked about in the chapter on learning about primary and secondary reinforcers. So money is a secondary reinforcer because it can get us the stuff that we need, it can get us food and shelter and our basic needs. So there's nothing wrong with being motivated by money. It's just that that's not the only motivation that you want to have. Most of us have motivations for love and connection with other people. Some of us care about flashier things and some of us don't care at all about this. So we're all motivated by very different things. These are all what we call external or extrinsic motivators. So there's two different types of motivation that we talk about. One is intrinsic motivation, and you can think of this as internal motivation and the extrinsic motivation as external motivation. But intrinsic motivation comes from within. So this guy is climbing this mountain for his own sense of accomplishment. He's not doing it for money or fame or fortune. He might get some, but that's not his goal. So it's when you're internally driven, students that are internally driven to be the best and do their best work, whether they want that 100% or that 95%. They're not happy with a B or a C. That's intrinsic motivation. So it's your drive to be the best. And just your drive to do things. I mean, there are other things that people are intrinsically motivated for, people that like to play music or exercise or lots of other things that are intrinsically motivated as well. Extrinsic motivation is external motivation, and we do it because of external motivators. We go to work because we get that paycheck. We're going to school because we want to get that diploma, we want to get that better job. So that's an external motivator, and some of those other things that we just talked about were external motivators. So how do we motivate ourselves when we don't want to do something? We have to do something and we're just not too excited about it. Think about your English paper that you may be writing or your math test that you need to study for. Do you just sit and wait to be motivated, wait for that motivation to come over you? You probably shouldn't, because it's probably not going to happen, right? You have to figure out how to motivate yourself to do some things that you don't want to do, because there's always things in life that you have to do that you're not too excited about doing, right? So what you have to do is connect what you have to do or what you need to do with something that does motivate you. So, you may not love your job at work, but you need that paycheck. You need to, get the money to drive your car or whatever it is. So you got to remind yourself of that, and that's what gets you to work every day. And the same thing with your papers and things like that is that you have to remind yourself that my goal here is to get my certification, get my diploma, and get a better job. So that's what's really motivating me, because you're not going to feel motivated to do stuff that you don't really want to do. You just have to push yourself in order to do that. So this arousal theory of motivation is pretty interesting. And what it says is that we have to have a certain level of arousal to be motivated, and that we're motivated to seek a certain level of arousal. So, and when we say arousal, this means that we're interested in things, we're active, we're alert, and we're interested in what we're learning. And if we don't have that, if it's too low, we're going to be bored, and if it's too high, we're too stressed out about it. That anxiety may actually get in the way of us being able to do the work. So most of us perform best at a moderate level of arousal. And what that means is you have to have a little bit of stress in order to motivate yourself to get stuff done, right? So you have an English paper that you have to do. If you have a real low level of arousal and you're like, I don't really care, I'm just going to fail this class, it's a stupid class anyway, it doesn't really matter, you're going to have a low level of arousal and you're not going to get motivated to get that paper done. But if you're like, I need to get this done, I have to pass this class to get my degree, it's really important to me, then you're going to get to that moderate level of arousal. So we have to have a certain level of stress that motivates us to actually get stuff done. If we don't have any stress, we won't get it done. So you have to have a certain level of stress. Now, if your stress is too high and you're panicked about doing this paper and you're telling yourself, I can't do it, I'm going to fail college, then that anxiety may get in the way of you doing it. So our optimal level of arousal is kind of that medium level of arousal. However, there are people, fortunately for those of us who don't perform well at a high level of arousal, there are people that we call sensation seekers that actually like high levels of stimulation, and they perform really well at high levels of arousal. So some people may crumble when there's a high level of arousal, whereas people that are sensation seekers actually sort of seek out that high level of arousal or that high level of stimulation. They need that, they thrive on that. So our police officers, our firefighters, our EMTs, emergency room doctors and nurses, they thrive on that high level of arousal and function really well at that high level of arousal. And I don't know if it's about 50-50 or so of people that really, enjoy that higher level of arousal. And then there's the rest of us that really prefer less stimulation. And you can see from this roller coaster ride here that some of these kids are really enjoying that ride and some of them are definitely not. And, the, it's and a lot of the people that actually EMTs and police officers often have that, they perform really well at that high level of arousal, and then even on their off time they have do a lot of sensation seeking activities like skydiving and things like that. So it's interesting to think about, which one are you? Do you prefer high levels of stimulation, or do you prefer just the moderate level, which is what most people prefer? The drive reduction theory of motivation is not very exciting. It's really just talking about our biological drives, and that we are driven to make sure that we're not hungry, that we're not thirsty, that we're not too hot, that we're not too cold. We're motivated to protect our bodies and to satisfy our biological needs, and that's called homeostasis. So our body is driven to maintain homeostasis. It doesn't want us to be too thirsty, it doesn't want us to be hungry. So we're driven to find food when we're hungry, we're driven to get something to drink when we're thirsty. So that's the drive theory of reduction theory of motivation. So this internal versus external locus of control, I don't think this is in the book, but it was this idea that Julian Rotter came up with in 1966. He was a psychologist, and he said that there are people that have an internal locus of control and there are people that have an external locus of control. And people that have an internal locus of control base their success on their own hard work. So they believe that if they work really hard, they'll be able to achieve their goals. And if they do fail, they tend to blame themselves for that failure. They don't blame other people. And because they have that internal locus of control, they motivate themselves to do things because they feel it's their responsibility to do that. So that's an internal locus of control. An external locus of control is where people believe that they're controlled by outside forces. They base their success on luck, not hard work. It's just, something good happened to them. They believe in destiny, that things happen and they don't have any, you don't have any control over it. And if they fail or have a failure, they blame other people or the circumstances for that failure. And they tend to rely on external motivation. So what do you guys think is better, internal or external locus of control? What's better for success? Well, we would probably say internal locus of control, because you definitely want to have a sense of control. If you want to believe and know that if you work really hard, you're going to be able to achieve your goals. Otherwise, you're not going to work very hard. So if you believe everything is externally controlled and everything's based on luck and destiny, you're not going to work really hard towards something, and you're probably not going to be very successful. But are there situations where an external locus of control might be appropriate? Are there things that happen in life that really are out of our control? Terrible things happen to people, tornadoes and hurricanes, and I'm trying to think of any other natural disasters happen, and people don't have any particular control over that. So an external blaming yourself for that situation is not your fault, right? And sometimes when you do have a failure, there's internal factors possibly, but there may also be external factors as well. So I think many of us have a little bit of an internal and an external locus of control. We probably have one is stronger than the other, and certainly internal is good for success, but don't always blame yourself for every failure. Make sure you look at all the possible circumstances and causes, and sometimes we can get stuck because we're blaming ourselves too much. So this is the last thing I'm going to talk about in this slide, and this is a theory from Albert Bandura, and he was the guy that talked about modeling behavior, and he had that Bobo doll experiment where he demonstrated that children will copy adults that have violent behavior, and he was really concerned about violence in television and video games, a very influential psychologist. And he also came up with this idea about self-efficacy. And what self-efficacy is that our belief. If we have self-efficacy, we believe that we can achieve our goals if we work hard enough, and that it's really important to have self-efficacy in order to motivate yourself to do something. So if you feel like you can accomplish this English paper, you're going to be much more able to do that. And usually I always tell students, don't wait to be motivated, just get started. And once you get started, you start to feel more motivated, because you start to feel like, okay, I've got this, right? And that I've got this feeling is that self-efficacy. In that belief, so self-efficacy is not, I'm great, I'm awesome, or whatever that we tell children sometimes. It's not just this belief that you can do it, but it's also this idea that I'm capable, I've done it before, I've done something similar before, I can do this, I've written papers before, I got through English in high school, I can do this. So it's a belief that you're capable, but it's a belief based on experience and past experiences. So, and self-efficacy certainly is a belief that you have control over your destiny. So an internal locus of control, but a belief that you can actually do it, and that it's a genuine belief, not just a I can do this kind of thing. So that's self-efficacy. And that is it on this video.